prepared me for what happened inside that room today. A woman walked in holding a photograph. Just one photograph. Her hands were shaking. Her eyes were red and swollen, like she hadn't slept in weeks, maybe months. And she sat down in that chair, in front of the judge, in front of the man who she says destroyed her family, and she held that photograph so tight against her chest, like it was the last thing she had left in this world. Because maybe it was. The man sitting across from her was different. He had this calm, almost bored look on his face, like he was waiting for a bus, like none of this was a big deal, like he had done nothing wrong at all. And today, Judge Laika had to decide who was telling the truth. Stay with me, because this is the kind of story that will make you question everything you think you know about trust, about friendship, and about how far some people will go for money. Okay, let me take you back to this morning. I got to the courthouse early, and I'm telling you, even before the session started, this place already had a heavy feeling to it. You know that feeling when you walk into a room and you just know something serious is about to happen? That's exactly what it felt like. People were sitting quietly. Some were whispering in small groups. Some were just staring at the floor. There was this older woman in the second row. She had her rosary beads in her hands, and she was moving her lips silently. I didn't know who she was praying for, but I had a feeling it was for the woman in the front, the plaintiff, Maria Vasquez. Maria was already seated at the plaintiff's table. She looked tired, like a person who has been fighting a long battle and is running on nothing but hope. She's probably in her late 40s, dark hair streaked with gray, a face that probably used to smile a lot. But today that smile was gone. She kept looking down at her hands and then back up at the door. On the other side of the room was Victor Cole. Victor Cole is exactly the kind of man who looks like he's never had a bad day in his life. Mid-50s, broad shoulders, the kind of confident posture you get when you've always had money. He was leaning back in his chair, just slightly, just enough to say, "I'm not worried." His lawyer was whispering something to him, and Victor just nodded, like he already knew how this was going to end. The room was filling up fast. Word had gotten out about this case. Some people in the crowd knew Maria personally. They kept giving her small nods, tight smiles, little gestures of encouragement. Others just came to watch. It was already feeling like more than a legal case. It felt personal. It felt human. Then, the door behind the bench opened, and Judge Laika walked in. Now, I want you to understand something about Judge Laika. She's not the kind of judge who fills a room with noise. She fills it with silence. Every single person in that courtroom, without anyone saying a word, straightened up, put their phones away, stopped whispering. She has this quiet, steady energy that tells you, here we deal in truth and nothing less. She sat down, adjusted the papers in front of her, looked around the room slowly. Not like she was scanning it, but like she was reading it, like she already understood everything happening in that space. And then she spoke. Judge Laika's voice was calm, clear. No rush at all. She said, "Good morning. We are here today in the matter of Vasquez versus Cole. This court will hear arguments regarding the alleged fraudulent transfer of ownership documents for Vasquez Family Bakery, a business established in 1998 by the late Daniel Vasquez." She paused for just a moment, and then she continued, "Let me be very clear about how this court works. Every person in this room will be treated with equal respect. Every word spoken in this room carries weight, and every decision I make will be based on evidence and truth, not emotion, not reputation, and not assumptions." Then she looked directly at Maria first, then at Victor. And then she asked, "Ms. Vasquez, Mr. Cole, do both parties understand the gravity of what we are here to resolve today?" Maria immediately said yes. Her voice was barely above a whisper, but it was firm, like a person who has been waiting a very long time to say that one word. She said, "Yes, Your Honor, I understand." Victor straightened up slightly. He cleared his throat, and then he smiled. Just a little. Not a warm smile. More like the smile of someone who thinks this is all going to be over very quickly. He said, "Absolutely, Your Honor. And I look forward to clearing my name completely." Something about the way he said "completely" made a woman in the third row let out a small, sharp sound, like a quiet scoff. Judge Laika's eyes moved to that direction for just 1 second. The woman pressed her lips together and went quiet. Judge Laika nodded slowly, and then she said, "Very well, Ms. Vasquez. As the plaintiff, you will speak first. Please tell this court in your own words what happened and why you are here today." Maria stood up slowly. She held that photograph I told you about. She placed it face down on the table in front of her, like she wasn't ready to look at it yet. She took a breath, and then she began. Her voice was soft and steady, but it broke just a little at the edges. She said, "Your Honor, my husband Daniel, he started that bakery with nothing. We were 26 years old. We had no money. We had no connections. We had one oven, 50 pounds of flour, and the belief that if you worked hard enough, something good would come." She stopped, swallowed, and then continued. "He worked every single day, holidays, birthdays. He missed our son's first steps because he was at the bakery at 4 a.m. making bread. He missed school plays. He missed dinners. But he never complained because he always said, 'Maria, one day this will be for our children. This will be their future.'" The room was so quiet you could hear the air conditioning humming. Maria kept going. Victor Cole was Daniel's partner for 11 years. They were like brothers. We invited him to Christmas dinners. My children called him Uncle Victor. I trusted this man. Her jaw tightened right there. You could see it. Something shifted in her face. Grief being pushed aside just for a moment to make room for something harder. Something that looked like rage being held on a very short leash. She said, "Daniel had a heart attack in March 2 years ago. He was 51 years old. He was gone in 3 hours, and I didn't even get to say goodbye." A woman in the crowd made a soft sound, and not quite a cry, but close. The old woman with the rosary beads closed her eyes. Maria continued. 6 weeks after we buried my husband, 6 weeks, Victor Cole came to my door. And he told me that Daniel had signed over 80% of the bakery to him. He showed me documents with Daniel's signature on them. He said the deal was finalized 3 months before Daniel died. She picked up a folder from the table. Her hands were shaking now. She wasn't hiding it. She said, "Your Honor, my husband never told me about this. He told me everything. In 23 years of marriage, we never kept secrets. He would never sign away the future of his children without telling me. And he would certainly not do it quietly, without a lawyer present, without any witnesses, without any record, except a single piece of paper that appeared out of nowhere after his death." Judge Laika was watching Maria with complete attention, not a single note being written, just watching, listening. Her expression was unreadable, not cold but controlled. Gently but precisely, Judge Laika asked, "Ms. Vasquez, did your husband ever mention any financial arrangement with Mr. Cole in the months before he passed?" Maria said, "No, Your Honor, never." Judge Laika asked again, "Did he ever express any concerns about the business? Any disputes with Mr. Cole?" Maria paused. She thought carefully, then she said, "He mentioned once, maybe 2 months before he died, that Victor had been pushing to expand, to take out large loans, open 3 more locations. Daniel didn't want that. He said it was too much risk. Victor was frustrated, but I thought it was just normal business disagreement. I never imagined—" She stopped herself. Then she continued, "Your Honor, I had the signature examined by 2 separate handwriting experts. Both of them concluded the same thing. The signature on those documents does not match my husband's normal handwriting pattern. There are differences in the pen pressure, the letter spacing, the way he curved his letters." She looked up from her papers and looked directly at Victor Cole. And she said, "My husband is not here to defend himself, so I am here for him." In the crowd, someone started crying quietly, not sobbing, just quiet, steady tears. The kind that come when something hits you in a place you weren't ready for. Victor Cole, sitting at the opposite table, had barely moved. But I noticed something. His jaw was tighter now. That bored, relaxed posture was still there, but the jaw was tight. His fingers on the table had curled slightly. He was very aware that the room was not on his side. Judge Laika spoke again. "Ms. Vasquez, I want to ask you something directly, and I want you to answer honestly." Maria said, "Of course, Your Honor." Judge Laika asked, "Is it possible, even a small possibility, that your husband made this decision and simply did not tell you? People sometimes make decisions in private to protect the ones they love." The room held its breath. Maria looked at Judge Laika for a long moment. And then she said something I will not forget for as long as I live. She said very quietly, but with absolute certainty, "Your Honor, Daniel used to wake me up at 2 in the morning just to tell me a funny joke he remembered. He cried when our youngest daughter lost her first tooth because he said it meant she was growing up too fast. He called me from the bakery every single afternoon, every single day for 23 years, just to ask how my day was going. Her voice got very quiet. A man like that does not keep secrets from his wife about the future of everything he ever built. Not without a reason, and there was no reason. Judge Laika looked at her for another moment. Then she wrote something down. Something long. She wrote for almost 30 seconds. Then she looked at Victor Cole. Victor stood up. And here's what surprised me. He stood up slowly, like he was choosing every movement carefully, like he had rehearsed this. He cleared his throat. He placed both hands on the edge of the table, and then he spoke. And his voice was completely, utterly calm. He said, "Your Honor, first of all, I want to say that I have enormous respect for Maria and for what she's going through. Losing Daniel was devastating for all of us. He was my friend. He was my partner, and I miss him every single day." From where I was sitting, I could see the side of Maria's face. Her expression didn't change, but her hand, the one under the table, curled into a fist. I could see the knuckles go white. Victor continued, "But grief can make us see things that aren't there. Grief can make us believe things that don't fit the facts. And the facts, Your Honor, are very simple." He reached into his folder and pulled out documents, clean, organized, neatly arranged. He said, 18 months before Daniel passed, he and I had several serious conversations about the future of the business. The bakery had grown beyond what either of us expected. We had opportunities in front of us: expansion, franchising, wholesale partnerships. But to do that, we needed real structural investment. Daniel was exhausted. He didn't want the pressure of managing a growing company. He wanted to step back. He paused there, like he was carefully choosing his next words. Then he said, "So we agreed, together, willingly, as equal partners and as friends, that I would take a majority stake in exchange for managing the expansion myself." The documents were prepared by a business consultant. Daniel reviewed them. He signed them. It was his choice, a free, informed, willing choice. Judge Laika's eyes went to the documents Victor slid forward. She picked them up. She examined them. Not quickly, but carefully, one page at a time. Then, without looking up, she asked, "Mr. Cole, these documents were prepared by a business consultant, not a lawyer?" Victor hesitated, just a flicker. Then he said, "That's correct, Your Honor. We were trying to keep things informal. We were friends. We trusted each other. We didn't think we needed the formality of legal counsel." Now she looked up, and she said, "Two men conducting an 80-20 ownership transfer of a business worth," she checked her notes, "estimated at $400,000 at the time of the agreement, chose not to involve a single attorney." Silence. Victor opened his mouth, then closed it, then opened it again. He said, Yes, Your Honor, we trusted each other enough to keep it simple." Judge Laika said in a completely neutral tone, "I see." She said nothing else. She put the documents down. She wrote another note. And I'm telling you, the temperature in that room dropped 3 degrees in the silence that followed. Victor continued, Your Honor, I understand why Maria has doubts. I do. But the document is real. The signature is real. And the fact that Daniel didn't mention this to his wife, that was his choice. Maybe he was waiting for the right time. Maybe he wanted to protect her from business decisions that stressed her out. I can't speak for him, but I know what he told me, and I know what he signed. He sat down slowly, and this time he didn't lean back. Then Judge Laika did something I didn't expect. She leaned slightly forward, and she said, Mr. Cole? Victor said, Yes, Your Honor. She said, You said you and Mr. Vasquez discussed this arrangement 18 months before his passing. Do you recall the specific conversations? The month, the location, the context? Victor nodded slowly, like he'd prepared for this. He said, We discussed it first in the spring, April, I believe. We were at the bakery after closing. Then again in the summer. Then in the fall, when we finalized the agreement. Judge Laika said, 3 separate conversations over 6 months. Victor said, Roughly, yes. She asked, And in none of those 3 conversations across 6 months, did Mr. Vasquez ever mention to you that he intended to speak with his wife about this decision? Victor paused. Then carefully he said, He said he'd handle it in his own time. Judge Laika said he would handle telling his wife that he was signing away the majority of the business they built together in his own time. Victor said, Yes. Judge Laika let a beat of silence pass. Then she said, And yet, he passed away 18 months later, and his own time never came. Victor said nothing. The judge looked down at her papers again, and she said, I am noting the absence of any third-party witness to these 3 described conversations. I am also noting the absence of any email, text message, or other communication between the 2 parties referencing this agreement during the 18-month period in question. She looked up. Is there any digital record, Mr. Cole? Any message, any call log, any record of communication between you and Mr. Vasquez specifically about this ownership transfer? Victor's calm cracked, just slightly, a very small crack. But I saw it. The jaw moved, the eyes shifted, just for a second, to somewhere over the judge's shoulder, and then came back. In a voice that was slower than before, he said, Daniel was not a big technology person, Your Honor. We spoke in person or on the phone. We didn't text about business matters. Judge Laika said, I see. Thank you, Mr. Cole. Please remain available for further questions. Victor sat down, and this time he didn't lean back. Judge Laika set her pen down. She folded her hands on the desk, and she looked from Maria to Victor and back to Maria, and in that moment the whole courtroom felt like it was holding one giant collective breath. She said, Ms. Vasquez, I want to return to something. You mentioned that you commissioned 2 handwriting analyses of the signature on the transfer documents. I have reviewed those reports in my preparation for today's hearing. Maria sat up straighter. Judge Laika continued. Both reports indicate inconsistencies in pen pressure and letter formation. Specifically in the way the letter D and the letter V are formed in the signature, compared to reference samples taken from documents Daniel Vasquez signed during his lifetime, tax documents, loan agreements, letters. She paused. However, handwriting analysis is not by itself conclusive proof of forgery. It is an indicator, an important one, but not a closed case. Maria nodded slowly. You could see she knew this was coming. Then Judge Laika said, "What I find more significant," and here she picked up one specific document and held it slightly, "is this." She looked at Victor. "Mr. Cole, this ownership transfer document is dated October the 14th. Can you confirm that date?" Mentor. Victor said, "Yes, Your Honor." Judge Laika said, on October the 14th of that year, Daniel Vasquez was admitted to County General Hospital at 7:42 in the evening for what medical records describe as, she read from a page, acute chest pain and irregular heartbeat. He was kept overnight for observation. He was discharged the following afternoon. She let that sit in the air for a moment. The crowd started murmuring, quietly at first, then growing. Someone gasped, a sharp, short sound. Judge Laika calmly let it settle. Then she said, "Medical records obtained with proper legal authorization confirm this. Daniel Vasquez spent the night of October 14th in a hospital bed." She looked at Victor Cole directly, and she asked, "Mr. Cole, if Mr. Vasquez was admitted to the hospital on the evening of October the 14th, where and when precisely did he sign these documents that are dated October the 14th? The room went completely, utterly silent. Victor Cole, the man who had walked in that morning looking like he hadn't a worry in the world, looked like the floor had just disappeared beneath his feet. His face didn't collapse all at once. It was more like watching something deflate slowly. The color drained. The jaw that had been so controlled, so deliberate, loosened. His eyes did something I could only describe as a kind of scrambling, darting left, then down, then to his hands on the table. He opened his mouth, and his voice, for the first time today, was not calm. He said, "Your Honor, the date may be, it's possible the date is wrong, a clerical error. Perhaps it was signed the day before, or the day after, and the date was recorded incorrectly." Judge Laika said quietly, but each word like a stone being placed, "Mr. Cole, you are currently under oath in a court of law. I want you to think very carefully before you continue." Victor stopped talking. His hands on the table, both of them, pressed flat against the surface, like he was trying to keep himself from sinking. In the crowd, the older woman with the rosary beads had stopped moving her lips. She was just staring at Victor with this expression. Not angry, not victorious, just deeply, deeply sad, like she was watching someone drown. Maria Vasquez had both hands over her mouth, not to suppress sound. I think to keep herself from saying something. Her eyes were bright, not with happiness. Something more complicated than that. Something that looks like grief and relief existing in the same moment, crashing into each other. Judge Laika said, "Let me ask you one more question, Mr. Cole. And again, you are under oath." She waited for Victor to look at her. He did, eventually. She asked, "Did Daniel Vasquez willingly, knowingly, and freely sign these transfer documents?" The silence stretched. 3 seconds. 5 seconds. 8. Victor Cole's chest rose and fell. And then something happened that I genuinely did not expect. His composure, that careful, expensive practice composure, broke. Not explosively, not dramatically. It broke the way old wood breaks, slowly, quietly, irreversibly. His shoulders came down, his hands came off the table. He looked at Maria. Actually looked at her. For maybe the first time today. And in a voice that was barely audible, he said, "No, Your Honor." He swallowed. He didn't sign them. The courtroom erupted. Not loudly, not like a movie courtroom, more like a room full of people who have been very, very tense for a very long time, suddenly letting go of the breath they'd been holding. There were gasps. There were whispers. There was one man in the back who said, not quietly enough, "Oh my God." Judge Laika let it run for exactly 3 seconds. And then she said, firmly, but not harshly, "This courtroom will be silent." And it was. I looked at Maria. She hadn't made a sound, but her shoulders were shaking. She had her hands pressed against her face, and her whole body was shaking with these quiet, controlled sobs that she was clearly fighting with everything she had. And then she stopped fighting them. She started crying. Really crying. The kind of crying that a person does after they've held something impossible inside them for too long and the container finally cracks open. Deep, heaving sobs. She pressed her fist against her mouth, but the sound came through anyway. The woman with the rosary beads in the second row, she started crying too. And she reached forward and touched the shoulder of the man sitting in front of her, and he put his hand over hers. I was not the only person in that room blinking very hard. I'm not ashamed to tell you that. Judge Laika looked at Maria, and in that moment, just for one moment, something shifted in her face. It was subtle, so subtle. A softening around the eyes, a tiny change, like she was human in this moment, not just a judge. But she didn't speak yet. She gave Maria a moment. Just one moment. Then Judge Laika said, gently but clearly, "Ms. Vasquez, I want you to hear what I'm about to say." Maria looked up. Her eyes were wet. Her face was splotchy. She looked exactly like what she was. A woman who had just survived something enormous. Judge Laika said, "You came to this court representing your husband's truth. You carried that weight when he could not carry it himself. Whatever the outcome of today's proceedings, that took courage." Maria nodded. Her lips were pressed together so tightly they were white. Judge Laika turned back to Victor. She said, Mr. Cole, you have under oath admitted that the signature on the transfer documents was not placed there by Daniel Vasquez, meaning these documents are fraudulent. You are aware that this admission carries serious legal consequences beyond the scope of this civil proceeding? Victor said, barely audible. Yes, Your Honor. Judge Laika asked, I want to ask you, not for legal purposes, but for the record of this room. Why? Why did you do this? Another silence. Victor looked down at his hands. He said, I thought I'd earned it. We built that business together. I gave 11 years of my life to it. And when Daniel died, I thought, if Maria inherits everything, she'll sell it, or it'll fall apart. I convinced myself I was protecting it, protecting what Daniel built. He looked up. His eyes were red now, too. He said, I told myself it's what Daniel would have wanted, and I kept telling myself that until I started to believe it. He looked at Maria, and he said, I'm sorry, Maria. Maria did not look at him. She looked at the photograph she had placed face down on the table in front of her, and slowly, she turned it over, and she looked at it. I couldn't see the photograph from where I was sitting. I don't know who was in it. I'm guessing it was Daniel. I'm guessing it was a good day. A bakery day, or a birthday, or just an ordinary Tuesday that turned into a memory. I'm guessing he was smiling. She looked at it for a long time. And then she said something. Very, very quietly, mostly to herself, I think. But in that silent room, I heard it. She whispered, I know, Daniel. I know. Judge Laika folded her hands again. She sat back very slightly, took a slow, measured breath. And when she spoke, her voice was steady, like bedrock. She said, in the matter of Vasquez versus Cole, this court finds as follows. Every person in that room went still. Judge Laika said, the transfer documents submitted by the defendant as evidence of an ownership agreement are determined by this court to be fraudulent. The defendant has confirmed under oath that the plaintiff's deceased husband, Daniel Vasquez, did not sign these documents. This confession, combined with the medical records establishing the impossibility of the stated signing date, renders these documents legally void and without effect. She paused, then continued. The Vasquez family bakery, in full, remains the property of Maria Vasquez, as the lawful heir of her husband Daniel Vasquez. The fraudulent claim of 80% ownership by Victor Cole is dismissed entirely. Victor Cole is hereby ordered to surrender any keys, access, financial accounts, and operational control of the bakery immediately, no later than 5 business days from today's date. She looked at Victor Cole directly and supper, and she said, additionally, this court will be referring the matter of document fraud and perjury to the district attorney's office for consideration of criminal charges. That determination is beyond the scope of this proceeding, but it is the obligation of this court to make the referral. Victor Cole sat in his chair and said nothing. He nodded once, barely. Then Judge Laika said, Ms. Vasquez. Maria looked up. Judge Laika said, "Your husband built something real, and this court has done its small part in making sure it stays in the hands where it belongs." She paused, and then she said, "This matter is resolved." She closed the folder in front of her, and she said two words that I actually felt, in my chest. Court adjourned. She stood, and every person in that room stood with her. And as Judge Laika walked out, calm, unhurried, exactly as she had walked in, Maria Vasquez pressed that photograph against her heart and cried in a way that made everyone around her cry too. Not sad crying, not only sad. It was the kind of crying that has relief in it. The kind that says, "It's over. It's finally over." The older woman with the rosary beads got up from the second row, pushed past the people between them, and wrapped her arms around Maria. And Maria leaned into her and cried and cried and cried. Victor Cole walked out of the courtroom alone. I stood there for a long time after everyone else started to move. I kept thinking about what it means to love someone so much that you stand up for them, even when they're gone, even when you're exhausted, even when no one will believe you, even when the whole world seems to be saying, "Let it go. It's too hard. You can't win." Maria didn't let it go. And I think about Victor too, not with anger, but with something more complicated. Because I don't think he was born a bad person. I think he was a person who told himself a convenient story, one small lie at a time, until the lie became so big it swallowed him whole. And that is a warning I think we all need to hear. As for Judge Laika, I've thought about this a lot, about what makes a good judge. And I think today I finally understand it. It's not about being the loudest voice in the room. It's not about being the smartest. It's about being the still, steady center that holds everything in place while the storm rages around it. It's about asking the questions that everybody else is afraid to ask. It's about caring, genuinely caring, about the truth, even when the truth is uncomfortable, even when the truth costs someone everything. Judge Laika's decision today felt fair. More than fair, it felt right. And I think fairness in a courtroom is one of the rarest, most precious things on this earth. Because most of the time, the people with the most money, with the smoothest talk, with the best lawyer, they win. That's just the world. But today, the person who had the truth on her side won. A widow walked into that court this morning with nothing but a photograph, 2 handwriting reports, and 23 years of knowing her husband better than anyone on earth. And she walked out with everything Daniel ever built for her family. I felt, and I'll tell you this honestly, I felt like crying on the way home. And I'm not someone who cries easily, but something about watching a woman fight for her husband's memory and win, it does something to you. It reminds you that love is not just a feeling. It's a force. It keeps going even after people are gone. It shows up in courtrooms. It holds photographs. It doesn't let go. Daniel Vasquez built a bakery, and today it went home. If you've watched this far, thank you. Genuinely, thank you. If this moved you in any way, Share it with someone, because stories like Maria's deserve to be heard. And if you're fighting for something right now, something that feels impossible, don't stop. The truth has a way of showing up exactly when it's needed. Even in October, even in a hospital room, even on a document with the wrong date, even in a courtroom in front of a judge named Laika. It shows up. Take care of each other. I'll see you next time.